Last week we explored Chesed. We used the Parsha of Noah as our historical context to show how for the first 1,000 years, the first millennia of existence, people lived unbelievably long lives. People could kill, they could rape, they could pillage, they could be corrupt, they could do anything they wanted to anything, and yet they lived long lives, no repercussions. Everyone seems to have had what they needed, besides the victims of any crime, but things were just great. Then came the flood, and all of a sudden everyone's living these short lives. And we spoke about how for the first millennia God ruled the world. Hashem ruled the world with midas hachesed, with this giving, with this sharing of energy, no matter what, without any feedback, without any constraints, and that's just how it was. And that was because of the first chapter of existence, starting with day one of creation. They had to, Hashem had to use chesed to create. To go from nothing to something was an act of sharing, was an act of creating, was an act of ultimate output. And output required chesed. What we're going to explore tonight is Gevurah. If I had to use if last week chesed was this week Gevurah is this. Withholding, retaining, restraining. But it's not entirely that. It's how we understand it to be that, but it's actually a lot more complex. Day two of creation. Last week I spoke about day one. Chesed, there wasn't, then there was. Hashem created. Gevurah is actually about weighing things up, establishing borders, deciding how much is appropriate. And what we actually see is on day one, Hashem created light and darkness. It doesn't say there was a separation of light and darkness. It just says Hashem created light and darkness, and that's what there was. And according to many of the Mefarshim, according to many commentaries and the Midrashic explanations, is that light and darkness were actually mixed together. They were not separate. I know that according to the laws of physics that makes no sense, but that's the reality of it. That according to the Medrash, it was mixed. This was part of the supernatural. Well, it's not that amazing compared to there being nothing and all of a sudden there being something, because that's going from infinite to finite, which we're going to explore tonight as well. And day two is compared to Gevurah, because on day two Hashem says, right, Yehi Rakia, let there be, I'm going to blow you away with this English word, a firmament. Basically, Hashem begins to separate higher and lower. Separation means definition. There is now a higher, there is now a lower. There is an order, and no longer can things coexist according to the spiritual laws of physics. Now things must be separated. And actually, if we go through the next days, everything is about further development and separation. Only later will come the separation of land and sea, and further development of creatures, of birds, animals, insects, the further development. But if you look at it, first was give, chesed, let there be, vayihi or, and there was light. Then Hashem starts saying, okay, this belongs up here and this belongs down there. Now that's how it's going to be. There's no more give. It's now definition. It's constraint. You will be limited to that zone and you'll be limited to that zone. That is Gevurah. Gevurah is also, although the world was created with chesed, the world was really created with Gevurah, because the initial energy shock was chesed, but anything beyond that was Gevurah. Now, which is interesting, because the name Elokim, Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning Hashem created, that's how we translate it. In the beginning God created. Completely lost in translation. Elokim is a name of God that's used primarily in the first book of the Torah, but it's not used as often, as frequently, in the last 4 books of the Torah. There's actually a transition. Bible critics will talk about different gods and all sorts of stuff. If they would actually open a book on Kabbalistic explanation, they'd actually understand why the reference to God in name changes from the beginning and from after Abraham and then from Moses. Everyone has their own, because they're dealing with different aspects and different levels. The people who wrote the Bible are so stupid to be inconsistent on that level, but obviously some people are that clever that they think others are that stupid. But Elokim, Bereshis bara Elokim, this first name of God that's used in the Torah, Elokim, according to Kabbalah and according to Chassidus, is Midas Hadin. Din means law. Din means judgment. A din Torah is a court case, a Jewish court case, according to the law of Torah. When someone has a lot of din about them, they are a very just person, but they will also tend to be a rather cold and calculating. I don't say that in a negative way, but I'm talking about they are very unemotional. Emotional people chesed seems to be a more emotion, more sharing of feeling. Gevurah is more restraint. And din is about seeing the truth and defining it, and then working out appropriateness. Now, the world couldn't be created with Gevurah, because ultimately if it was, nothing would have existed. Because if chesed, remember we're talking still, last week and this week we're talking in absolute terms. Absolute chesed is just outward, pouring, sharing to an extreme. And we gave a corrupt example of corrupt chesed. Inappropriate chesed would be when a child says, "Oh, please buy me a pocket knife, Mummy." And Mummy says, "Oh, but out of sheer love, but of course I will." That's chesed. Mummy is giving. However, it's inappropriate chesed. Gevurah would be, you're not getting anything ever, because I'm just so tight, not cheap, tight. I'm not letting anything go. If the world was created with Gevurah, there'd be no creation, because all energy would have been restrained and everything would have been retained. After the chesed has to come the Gevurah to now define what happens. This much energy for that, a little more for this, a little more for that. It's a navigator, as in the electrician's term of a navigator. You turn on one switch, it automatically faults another switch, so as to control how much energy. So that's din. What's required for din? Another word for Gevurah is strength. Strength is what's required. If you think about it in context of a court case, or in context of a mediation, that impartial body, whether it be the judge or a friend to both parties, whatever it is, I'll have two people sitting on a couch, which is part of my day job. I'm not a psychiatrist, but people come and will sometimes ask for a bit of help, a bit of assistance in a relationship or something, and two people come and one will pour out their side. Very, very moving, very, very touching. It makes me want to cry. And then the other side pours out their side, and then I want to cry again. Who do I go with? I'm overcome with emotion. I can't make a fair judgment. I need that certain strength to not become emotionally involved, to be able to hear and try to see the facts for what they are, so as then to be able to put forward a judgment, so as then to put forward a piece of advice. Because if I get too emotionally drawn in, then I'm not actually going to be able to make an impartial decision. It's going to be whoever's got the better sob story wins. Now, what we're going to touch on today was actually a very, very good question that was asked at the end of last week. At the end of last week, I finished with this very cryptic, actually it wasn't cryptic, it's one of these new age, it was a Twitter statement, really. It was less than 140 characters. It sounded good at the time, but it's actually not true at all and incorrect. And thank God we don't implement Twitter in real life. We just tweet about things to make us look good, but no one actually lives by those statements of goodness and lofty behaviour. And that was, I said, let's start focusing on some just love. Love, unconditional love was what I said. And I stand by that we should work on trying to give some unconditional love. However, is unconditional really unconditional? Are there no conditions that could change this? And the example was, what about abuse? Let's talk in an abusive relationship. I don't think this was exactly a question. I brought this up in context of the question. That was abuse. Someone's abusing me. but out of love I'm going to stick with them. Is that love? Is that what chesed, is that what I was talking about? And my conclusion last week was absolutely not. That's not what I'm talking about at all. That's not love. That could be completely misguided chesed, but that's not love. And because love actually is not chesed and love is not gevurah, we're going to discover that you need both chesed and gevurah in a love situation. Kindness and sharing is chesed. They may be attributes of love, but that is not love in its entirety. Gevurah is withholding. And I'm going to give you an example of love where you need withholding. You have a loved one, and that loved one okay, let's use abuse. That loved one bashes you. That loved one is absolutely inhumane to you. Beats you till you're blue. Love is not live with it. Love is the following response. Oh my God, there is something seriously wrong with you, and I want to help you. And out of love, I'm calling the police to get you locked up, to get you into rehab, to get you onto medication, to get you into a position where you can start living your life. That's love. That is an unbelievable level of love. Show me a person that can really talk like that in real life. Most people would say retribution. You do this if they can come to, if someone can come to that state of actually the realization of the relationship and then say, I can't continue living like this, and then we lock someone up. And just to keep them there. I don't care what the hell happens to that person. They can rot in hell. That's more retribution. It's not unjustified. But if I had to use gevurah in the sense of love, it was my first example. I'm using strength. I'm not going to live with you, and I'm not going to let you get away with this. I'm not just, go for it, whatever, chesed. I'm going gevurah here, baby. I'm going to lock you up. I'm going to confine you. I'm going to restrain my feelings, and I'm going to do this because it's in your best interests. That's an unbelievable level of love. But this series is not on love. It's on exploring each emotion for itself. So let's get back into gevurah. That's an example of gevurah. What I want us to do is, what page am I starting with? 864? So we're now Lessons in Tanya, 864. The truth is, we're actually on 863, but it's the bottom line. And so as to save trees, I thought we would have last week's photocopies, but we don't. But it's one line, so let me read it. Indulge me for a moment, and then we'll be up to you on 864. וכמו שאין ביכולת שום שכל נברא להשיג מידס גדולתו, שהיא היכולת לברוא יש מאין ולהחייסה כדכתיב עולם חסד יבונה. And just as it is impossible for the mind of any creature to apprehend his attribute of gdula, gdula means greatness. Remember last week we were talking about Haggadah v'Hanora. We're talking about different words that were mentioned in the silent Amidah that we read every day. So we can't apprehend this attribute of Gdula, which is the ability to create a being out of nothing. That was chesed. Remember, we have no idea of what infinite means to become finite. We have no idea of the concept of nothing. We have no idea of the concept of beyond time. The reason why we have no idea is because we are born in a system which is completely defined by time and space. We can't possibly comprehend something that we can't relate to and have never seen, never witnessed. It's almost not even theory. It's too hard to relate to. The world is built by chesed, by kindness. Kach, I'm on 864. Mamash ein biyacholto lahasig midas gvurasoi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shehi midas hatzimtzum mnias hispashtus hachayis migdulasoi. Exactly so is it impossible for a person to apprehend the divine attribute of gevurah, of might, of restraint, which is the faculty of tzimtzum, which means condensation or contraction. Condensation as in the slow condensing of an item. Restraining the spreading forth of life force from his attribute of gedula, which was kindness, which was the greatness of creating. So what we're zoning back into is out of history, out of this world, out of all of the lofty din examples. We're now going back into the process of creation to understand the 10 Sefirot, and over here the Sefirot of Gevurah. preventing it from descending upon and manifesting itself to the creatures and providing them with life and existence in a revealed manner, but rather with his countenance concealed. I just want to highlight what we've just read. His countenance is concealed. There are a lot of syllables in that sentence. His countenance is concealed. There's a lot in that sentence that we've got to press pause and just say, well, what's here? What's in this sentence? Hashem creates. Time and space we've gone through a million times. We know that that's where we live, and we understand that we don't understand anything beyond that. But this is even better. If you asked any child, which we all are, where do you come from? So if you ask this in kindergarten, we come from, parents giggle. If you ask it in grade 6, the students giggle. But the question stands, where do we come from? You ask any person, I come from my mummy and daddy. Or in today's society, with a bit more understanding of how everything works, we'll say, well, I come from a male input and a female input. And that is me. A human is born of this very beautiful chemical reaction that happens on a microscopic level. Yeah, really? All 6 foot of you? Yes, all 6 foot of you takes place from this microscopic. Really, all that complex system, all that comes from there. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, and who created your mummy and daddy? Well, actually, this is a constant effect. Their mummy and daddy did it. And go back. And I don't care if you want to go with the Big Bang Theory tonight. Go with the Big Bang Theory. I prefer to go with the creation theory because I prefer to be from God than a process of accidents and evolution, but that's my ego talking. But ultimately, where do I come from? And that's a question that no one can ask. Even behind the Big Bang, well, what caused it? What was before? What led to the mass forming? You can't be above time in science. It's just not allowed. You can't play by godly rules and the rules of definition of time and space. What happened before time? And this is what we're talking about. I don't know. Even if you ask me, ask a rabbi, ask a Kabbalist, what happened before? The truth is we don't know. We know what we're told. We know the world. But if you would have asked Adam, who created you? He would have said God. But he would have only said it because he intellectually has been told that, not because Adam knows it. And that's because it is impossible for us to know such a thing. This is a belief. It's impossible for us to know it because understanding means we've grasped the idea. I grasp that I come from my parents. I get that. You can explain it to me. You can make videos on TED.com and watch the whole embryonic development. It's fantastic. I get that. I understand it. I can picture it. But I can't picture creation. So I know it because I've learnt it and it works with me and all that. But when we talk about Gevurah and Chesed, if Chesed had its way, we would know we come from Hashem. We'd see it. Gevurah isn't just restraint and shielding and concealing. It is concealing it so well that we don't even know that it's there. So if you think about it, put on sunglasses when driving down the highway. It's the sun setting like a month ago. Now the sun sets so quickly. But like a month ago, when you had that glare, or first thing in the morning, that 7 o'clock glare when you're driving uphill and you just can't see anything because the light's beaming down, or when the sun sets, you're driving down and it's coming off the tram tracks and you're like, oh my God. So you put on sunglasses and now you're not driving like this, you're driving like this. Like, you can still hardly see, and the black silhouettes, you don't know if they're real people or whether it's just the shapes in your eyes. What's the sunglasses? They're Gevurah because they're restraining to a degree, they're shielding, they're being protective. But the sun is so strong that the sunnies don't stop anything. You know the sun's there. We are talking about Gevurah being a restraint in creation to the point that completely wiped the godly footprint away. So we're left with not even being aware, not even fully knowing what our origins are. That is Gevurah. When we talk about Tzimtzum, Tzimtzum is the process of creation, the contraction. In the beginning, before Bereshis, before Genesis, the real in the beginning, before beginning was invented, there was Hashem. We are talking about raw energy in its rawest form, uncontained, infinite amounts. We're talking about light as a euphemism, light as an analogy, light as just a word, because light is the only thing we can relate to that just goes and is so powerful that it can blind a person. Light is something that makes things grow, so we like using the word light. But when we talk about before existence, there was just blinding energy. And then Tzimtzum takes place. We call it the machshava. Hashem had an idea. And we're not going into all this tonight, because this is a series of its own, the process of creation. This is when we look at the Sefirot as creators, not just as emotions. And this series is about the emotions. But the machshava, the idea in which Hashem sees the end product and therefore sets into play a process of thoughts which will allow for creation to begin, to allow the ball to begin to roll, so that eventually the world will come to a state of what the end of time looked like, which is what Hashem was working towards, creating. I better just let you in on this, because you're going to say, oh, this sounds a bit trivial, unless you know what I'm talking about, in which case you're not going to say that, but still, we've got to be safe here. We don't want anyone to think creation was trivial. Hashem had this end game. The end game is actually very, very simple. It's so simple that it actually makes it very difficult. The end game was, I would love to create a creation that is independent of me and yet will still choose me. Think about it, it's a pretty cool game. Hashem, all-powerful one, creates the most complex system in order to allow creation to take place. This is the system before creation, including Olam HaTohu, which people love talking about, the tohu, the chaos. What was the chaos? One of the most common questions I get at the end of Kabbalah class is if I allow people to hang around long enough, once all the good questions have moved on, and there's this moment of silence, like goes for 2 minutes of quiet, and then all of a sudden it's like, Menachem, tell us about the chaos. What's the chaos all about? Oh no, not 11 o'clock at night. I don't do good. The only chaos is if I don't get home, there'll be chaos in my house. That's chaos. This whole process of creation, the chaos before the order, the Sefirot and everything, was just to create an existence called mankind, the human race, which would have no certainty as to where it comes from, and is only left with a belief system and a free choice option, and somehow the end goal is Hashem would love to see a spiritual world, a united world, a world of higher consciousness, blah, 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 which only comes from a state of belief, and we somehow have to make that choice. It's unbelievable. The infinite being somehow removed infinity, removed his footprint, in fact, made even belief extremely difficult. We're not even given like a bone from time to time, unless you really believe that you were given a bone. It is that hard. It is that easy to be an atheist in today's day and age that one can only say, what does God want from us? What does he want from us? It's so easy to not believe. And yet, that is the greatest challenge. That's called real free choice. When we are able to seriously live life without a belief and live happily ever after, or we can live with belief and live happily ever after, that's free choice. That's why Hashem created. So when we talk about Tzimtzum, which means contraction, Tzimtzum only takes place with Midas HaGevurah, with this form of constriction and contraction, and that is we begin with infinity, and then there's this weird process in which the infinite allows finite to exist. Let me just define that for a sec. You take a glass and put an infinite amount of water into it, it's going to explode, and yet within this infinite existence, the finite did not explode, although it did the first time round, but that was deliberate. That's the chaos that we're talking about. That was deliberate so as to lead to the next process of creation. I just learned, did I just learn it last week or the week before? Whatever it was fairly recently in my life. I just learned that Hashem had to work with Ilah va'olul, cause and effect, chain reaction to create. Because a chain reaction is the direct result, but it has nothing to do with the first. If you think about it. That wasn't a chain reaction. That was a direct result of me throwing. But the air movement that then moved other things, that had nothing to do with me directly. That had to do with my action, which then led to a further cause and effect. You can see that there's a level of separation from me being the original cause. Hashem had to create a process of chain reactions, which wouldn't have a direct connection with the infinite. That then leads to a number of reactions which are within a controlled environment, call it the great laboratory. And then we end up, each reaction is a planned reaction that has been created within the world of potential, which Hashem has created every potential outcome, but the outcomes are not directly Hashem, they are only from His O, which is much like the result of the sun is its light, but the sun is not the light. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about very, very abstract difference here, but what we end up is with this 10-step process of then whittling away the finite O, the finite energy within a semi-constrained, contained working, and Tzimtzum is then the breakdown, the whittling away, the whittling away, the whittling away, the further definition, the further definition, the further definition, all the way down, like I explained last week with the power station from the lawn power plant, all the way to our house until we get to this small amount of energy. Chesed got the energy going, but Gevurah constrained, and Tzimtzum is the process of creation in which the energy was whittled away, whittled away, whittled away, whittled away, until eventually Hashem could begin to create spiritual definition, which would lead to physical definition. All a process of Tzimtzum, the contraction of what? Contraction of exposure to light, the contraction of light itself. So when we talk about Gevurah, it's not just that it's contained. It is so contained that we're not even aware of it anymore. Because if we were aware, we'd be directly affected. If we had a footprint, if we had an outright godly footprint in this world, there'd be no choice. If there was even a hint of the original chesed, the whole purpose of creation would be wrecked. If you could go to that cave and you could see that burning bush all the time, what's the challenge? There's no challenge of belief when that's given to you on a silver platter. And so Gevurah wasn't just to allow the finite to exist, because with too much infinite chesed, everything would constantly be exploding because you can't contain the light. It had to go a step further. Chesed had to completely remove, not just remove the glare with sunglasses in the sun, had to completely remove the sun. There's no sun. Yes, there is. No, there isn't. It's like a child with the moon. No, the moon gives off light. The adult says, no, it doesn't. It just reflects the sun's light. No, don't be silly. Don't be silly. The moon's its own shine. That's what Gevurah did. Gevurah is like the child with the moon. Gevurah makes you think there is, no, the sun has its own, the moon has its own. There's no such thing as the sun. It's the moon. Gevurah had to remove everything so as to allow the purpose of Tzimtzum to exist. Shahachayas mistasa beguf hanivra keilu guf hanivra hu davar bifnei atzmai. For the life force conceals itself in the body of the created being, making it appear as if the body of the created being had independent existence. Like we all do. We all think we're independent. We all think everything's a free-for-all. When in truth, like I said last week, that Hashem in His goodness, B'tuvay in His goodness, is constantly recreating. We don't really live consciously with that idea because it's so hard to keep that in mind with the distractions of reality, which is not really reality, but with the distractions of reality, it's very hard to think like that. And therefore, there's this complete concealment. And making it appear as though the created being was not merely an extension of the life force and the spirituality that creates it, just like the diffusion of the radiance of light of the sun, but an independently existing entity. At least when you see a sun ray, you go, oh, the sun ray comes from the sun. Easy, I can see that. But you don't say, humanity, the soul, yeah, that's connected to God. You don't see that. We say it, but we don't see it. really spiritual people, very, very, just a quick segue. Do you know what a spiritual person really is? It's such a weird term, a spiritual person. What's a spiritual person? A spiritual person is actually a really sensitive person. Not just sensitive to people's feelings, not just aware, sensitive to what's going on around them, but so sensitive that they are picking up on the very vibrations of existence and what makes things happen, what makes things exist. Sensitive to the point that they are able to feel, and if they are more sensitive, able to see the spiritual life force that allows something to exist. And we know this because a number of stories with very, very famous spiritualists and famous Mekubalim and famous tzaddikim and famous rabbeim, spiritual masters, people would question them, say, well, what gives you the right to comment or talk about things that aren't within your domain? You're a rabbi, you're from the village, or you're from this town, or you're from an era. You don't know better. What makes you get off to be able to say something that might contradict a doctor, might contradict a business analyst, may contradict logic? And more often than not, the response of the tzaddik was, I'm not contradicting. You asked me a question, I've been ma'ayin, I've looked into it, and I can see that spiritually what you're suggesting doesn't stack up. So I'm just telling you that what you're doing either doesn't make sense or it's impossible, and therefore get more opinions or change the way or do something different. It's not that I'm reading science journals or medical things or business things. It's not that. You ask me a question, I see the world from a very different point of view to you. I see it and spiritually lined up, and if it's not congruent, I'll let you know. And that's why I'm here to help souls, and that's why tzaddikim would be there. They were just there to correct people and help people and recover people, because they just wanted the squares to fit into the squares, the triangles of the triangles, and the circles of this world, so that the puzzle of the world would actually look proper. They weren't feeling around in the dark and hypothesizing and projecting. They saw it as it was. See it as it is. There's always a tzaddik, there's always a righteous person, there's always a spiritualist alive. But,
so,
yeah.
The spiritual world, after
death, yeah.
Was that part of his creation?
Yeah, everything was part of creation.
Like the opposite side of life is the afterlife, and therefore that was all part of the whole tzimtzum of the whole...
No. Well, yes and no. It is part of the tzimtzum. It's all part of the process. But it's not a before or after. Remember, we're the only ones that live in before and afters. In every other realm, it's a mirror. It's a mirror. So, who has been on a flying fox? You know what a flying fox is? Yeah, good. So, I'm not talking about one of those flying foxes where you held a thing in the park, and I'm talking about you've been in a harness, you've been dangling by a rope or a wire or whatever it is, and it's 1, 2, 3, jump. And you're flying, skimming across the water, whatever it is, across a valley. You're flying. What is going on right above you? Across that wire, there is this thing with 2 wheels that holds you, also flying across. It's happening parallel. Are you up there? No, that's your source. That's holding you up. You're down here, but the 2 move at the same time. So this whole afterlife business is only in context of a life. In context of a soul, there's no afterlife, because it's always life. It was there before, it was there during, and it's after. Remember, we've got 5 levels of neshama, 3 within us, 2 outside of us, in a realm of where time and space doesn't exist, really. So when our neshama leaves our body, it all completely returns to that. But right now, we are actually playing out a play that is going on a spiritual stage. We are merely the physical reflection of that. So on a much higher spiritual level, all of us here, our souls are actually united on a completely different plane as we speak. As we speak, and our souls are accomplishing an unbelievable thing in a completely different realm. Everything is a mirror of something higher than it. Ultimately, the mirror of where everything meets up as one, the level of Yechidah, the place where everything is one. So, when we talk about tzimtzum, these different levels are part of the tzimtzum existence, but it's not that those lead to this, they all exist at the same time as this. So it's I don't know, if there's a third dimension, there's a fourth dimension. A friend of mine in South Africa is giving a class on the fifth dimension. I would talk about this being the fifth plus dimension, where all dimensions become one dimension. It's like when you're in that mirror maze and you look in the mirror in front and it's reflecting the mirror behind. It just goes infinite backwards and forwards. Like, wow, there are so many of me's there and there. And then you do this in front of the mirror, like, oh, that's so cool, they're all dancing. I've got a whole rhythm going. And it's not just me, it's all of them. So...
What's the name of the spiritual life force you were talking about in Hebrew? The word. I know in Hindi and things like that, they call it Shakti and things like that.
What's the life force?
The Hebrew word for it.
Well...
They're talking about it.
Chayos means life, from the root word chai. Life. So everyone has a chayos. Everyone has a life force. The life force comes from Hashem. We all benefit from the Or, maybe that's what you're wanting. The Or is the light that radiates, that allows everything to exist, as opposed to from God, from Hashem. We don't actually get from Hashem because that's an infinite. Or is this chain reaction byproduct. Maybe there is a word and I've just gone blank. We'll see if it pops. Have I said it already?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so let's see if it pops up. Let's see if a word pops up, if a good word. I'm just going to continue reading. Although in reality the created being has no independent existence and is only like the diffusion of the light from the sun. Keep reading. This capacity for self-concealment is the very restraining power of the Holy One, blessed be He, who is omnipotent. And hence, able to condense the life force and spirituality which issues from the breath of His mouth and to conceal it. So all continuing with this idea of Gevurah and the concealment. For what purpose? So that the body of the created being shall not become nullified out of existence. Because if we were completely in touch with our infinite source, we'd blow to bits, because we're a finite existence. There's a medrash that says that there was a rabbi in the Talmud, I think Rabbi Shua ben Levi, I think. I didn't prepare this part. This is just off the top of my head. I actually know a few things out of the class, but that a chariot came down from heaven, picked him up, and took him off. And there's a lot of discussion. What does that mean? He physically got in and then was taken to a spiritual zone. But if you start thinking about it, when a person makes the conscious realization, not just knows it because 1 + 1 = 2, but comes to comprehend the concept of 1 + 1 = 2. When a person comes to the realization that they are a soul, as is everything around them, and you start basically seeing the matter of it all, you don't see difference, you just see everything as being illicit, everything is godliness, everything is essence. Once your limited capacity starts realizing the infinite capacity of everything, you can't continue to exist. Because the only reason why we exist and the only reason why we function and see anything is because we see difference. We don't see similarity, we see difference. I see the contrast of the white sheet on the white piece of paper on the blue tablecloth. I see the contrast of black ink on white paper. I only see contrast. I only see difference. That's why difference is actually a beautiful thing if you can come to appreciate it, as opposed to try to make everything the same. If everything's the same on a spiritual level, if everything's the same and you come to realize everything's essence, you can't exist because you've now become consciously part of the essence. You can't come back into a world of difference because you don't see difference. So you can't exist. There's this very interesting discussion. Is that what happened? Was it that the Merkava came down as he made this conscious realization that he doesn't exist? In which case maybe he can't exist anymore. In which case, on his physical level, on his conscious level, he gets in the chariot and off he goes to join the great bonfire of neshamas, the great collection of where everything is one. It does your head in. So that the body of all created beings shall not become nullified out of existence. That's what I'm talking about. You become nullified. We can't contain infinity, and if we comprehended infinity, we wouldn't be able to remain finite. We'd become part of the infinite. It is beyond the scope of the mind of any creature to comprehend, so this completely outdoes the discussion I just brought up, but it is beyond the scope of the mind of any creature to comprehend the essential nature of the tzimtzum and concealment. We don't understand it. So we go with it like we go with 1 + 1, but how many of us really understand the science and the real reason behind 1 + 1? And to comprehend that nonetheless the tzimtzum, notwithstanding the creature itself, is to be created ex nihilo. So we're going through the Chesed Gevurah, and I just want to maybe skip. No, I want to press pause. So what have we got? We understand now what the Sefirah of Gevurah is. Chesed we understood as give. Gevurah is not just restraint, but it is this element of strength to completely remove. It can completely close the door on even realizing what is truth. It limits all chesed, or the ability to recognize the chesed. So it doesn't necessarily fight chesed, it's working with chesed in order to allow the chesed to continue to exist. So on some ways it complements, on other ways it completely goes against. Let's look at the court case again. You've got two types of judges. You've got the one judge who, I just want to see before we get to finish. We've got one type of judge that sits there listening to two sides, and the prosecution says, this felon, this yobbo has done crimes A, B, and C, and the criminal says, yeah, I'm guilty, I did it. And what does the judge say? Well, I've got belief in you, sonny. I'm going to give you one more chance. That has not been midas hadin. There hasn't been true judgment. It is the judgment of the judge. The judge has made the judge's statement, his or her sentence. But that hasn't taken into account what is best for the person or what is best for society. So this brings up a discussion of what is the point of jail? What is the point of incarceration? Is it to get criminals off the street, or is the purpose to rehabilitate them? And this would come down to, is it Gevurah just to close the door on their life and close them to protect us? Or is there still a chesed shebegvurah, that within this constraint, within this limiting of their life, there's an act of chesed of now, within the jail, I'm going to help them. So we actually can see how chesed and Gevurah can actually work together, even though it's more dominated by Gevurah. Now, Gevurah also comes into what we discussed last week. We spoke about Yamin Makareves. I've got to make sure I'm talking with my right hand. The right hand brings close, the Smolo Derchik, and the left hand pushes away. And this is a lesson in how we conduct ourselves. We bring close with our strong arm, and we push people away with our weaker arm. Remember what I said last week, that ideally, in the divine image of the person, right is a more dominant and left is a weaker, and therefore we use our strength to actually bring people closer, and we only use our weakness, our weaker side, to push people away, because it's not about pushing people away as much as it is bring people close. So let's just talk about this Gevurah. Let's talk about this left side this week. There are times that it's important to use that push away. When we talk about the situations of where a person can't live with another human being because it's just not safe, that is a time for Gevurah. That is a time for din. That is a time for look at the facts on the ground and make a very clear decision. Make that very, very clear decision of this cannot continue. Not that I can put up with it, this cannot continue. So Gevurah is going to play out in the way we live in a number of different ways. It will be saying no to a person, saying no to a child that says, I want the pocket knife. No, you can't have that pocket knife. It's not safe. It's a person who says, I want another piece of cake, and it's saying, no, you are diabetic. You are not having that another piece of cake. Gevurah has its place because basically the world can't exist without Gevurah. Chesed allowed it to begin. Hashem then used Gevurah for the next 6 days of definition. So too in our life. We're given this abundance of energy, but we actually use Gevurah to control how our energy flows. Now think about this for a sec. Naturally, we are all Balei Chesed. Almost 100% of people. Almost the whole world. I'm sure there are some exceptions. Balei Chesed means we naturally tap into Chesed. We naturally want to give. We are emotional creatures, which tend to usually allow us to be sucked into an emotional situation. And naturally, subconsciously, we are always engaging in Chesed. Consciously, though, we engage Gevurah a lot more. If you think about it, when you say no to something, there's been a thought process, and you're a lot more conscious of that thought process.
What about things that are beyond, things that are faithful, that come into our lives, and we have totally no control over it? Isn't that also a reason? I mean, if we want to acquire that characteristic of Gevurah, is how we deal with these fateful events that are.
So
we have any control over.
So the question is, dealing with things that we don't have any control over. Correct. We don't have any control over it, and therefore we have to deal with it. Dealing with it will usually require an element of Gevurah, and that is that I have to. An example of where something happens to a person that's completely out of control and yet it's totally in their control is someone who is going through what Tanya calls, we're not talking about clinical depression here, we're just talking about a depressed person, someone who's really down. In that moment they are extremely emotional. People are emotional, when you've had just a really lousy day, anyone that could have walked on you did walk on you, and everything looking forward is grim, and it's looking shocking. It's so natural to fall into an emotional heap. Gevurah demands us to remain up here. The Gevurah isn't thinking. That's Mayach. That's Chochmah bin Adas. But Gevurah is the emotion that we need to use to shut off the emotions from getting out of control. So what comes first, chicken egg? The mind says employ Gevurah, that strength of character to not allow the emotions to well up and allow the mind to deal with the situation. So often people do that. You think about it. The most famous stories of mothers who in a moment of seeing something shocking about to happen to their child just employ they're just ready. They are ready. They go into this complete state of focus. And then afterwards they collapse into a pile of a bundle of nerves and emotions. I don't think it's really mums. I think it's a lot of humanity. I think we just use mums as an example because I think mums face it a few more times with little kids. Like there is always a moment to panic where they just hold it together and then they break down in a sad heap. And I think we relate to that. But I think everyone has a moment like that in their life. And sometimes we deal with it and sometimes we don't. When we're being mugged, someone's about to bash us on the street, and you get into this fight or flight stage, and if Gevurah is in place, you're going to make a very cold, calm, you're going to allow your Mayach, you're going to send the message from here back upstairs, go, right guys, what am I doing? And you'll assess the situation. Gevurah doesn't assess the situation. Gevurah allows you to get into a state of assessment, and then you'll start going, okay, what am I going to do? And you think about it. 3 big 8-foot ogres, me, little puny 5-foot person that's never learned any martial arts. Intellectually, I should be able to outrun them. Off I go. Then Chesed gets pumping. Gevurah does not get involved at all there. Chesed, you get full energy rush into every limb. All Gevurah might do is say, hey, that limb doesn't need any energy right now. Let's just remove the energy from going there and divert it to our legs. That's where Gevurah will come in place. But Chesed is just going to be pumping. But the Gevurah in the moment has been the process of allowing your machshava to take over. Then your Chesed and Gevurah will work out the ratio. That's the word I wanted. Gevurah allows the ratios to be meted out. Chesed is just going to give. Gevurah goes, right, this body needs legs, 80% energy, arms, 15% to keep balance. Everything else, survive. Because right now, 110% energy is going to be used on flight. And that's what we do. But it's Gevurah. It's that element within us that actually allocates who's getting what chesed, who's getting what energy. Because the body's just making, and in an uncontrolled manner, it'll just go all over the place. But I want to talk about Gevurah in another situation. We spoke last week about Abba ve'Imma, about father and mother. And we spoke about the father is the giver, in the process of creating a child, and we spoke about the child in context of Chassidus being a ben, a son. Chesed gives, Chesed produces, the male produces, Gevurah retains. The female does nothing. The female, as in, becomes completely passive, accepts, but then what does the female body actually do in the process of creating a child? It does ultimate Gevurah. It seals itself off. And if it doesn't seal, that's when you go to a doctor, say there's been blood spotting or something really scary like that. But in the 9 months of pregnancy, that womb has been sealed. That moment of Gevurah, of where the mother side of this child has now taken place. Nothing will get out, nothing comes in. Gevurah is in complete control of this child becoming a living being. And then will come Tiferes, in which, with the right amount of energy, the child is going to come out. And the child will come out, push, not too hard, not too, it's got to come out. And what's our product of Tiferes? Tiferes is the balance. We've got aspects of the male, aspects of the female, aspects of chesed, aspects of Gevurah. Generally, what we're going to discover next week is that we're slightly weighted to the chesed side, not because we're more male dominant, but we are more chesed dominant. It's funny because even though in the mashal chesed is the male and Gevurah is the female, in true life, often in Chassidic, in a lot of literature, it's swapped around. Chesed is the female, and Gevurah is the male. And we talk about women being a lot more caring and sharing, and men being a lot stronger, as in not stronger, because nowadays you don't talk like that, but stronger as in more retaining, more cautious. More on the defensive, women are more on the offensive. These are chesed and Gevurah things, not in a good or bad way. This is just a balance that we find. So Gevurah plays out in a number of different ways, on a number of different levels. If I have to use your analogy of, well, hang on, what's the afterlife? Where's that taking place? It's all happening at the same time. It's on different levels. So there's Gevurah in creation. There's Gevurah as a personality. There's Gevurah in a way our body functions. There's Gevurah in the analogy of creating life. There's Gevurah all over the place. So just like I said last week, let's start discovering chesed. And the only reason why I said go practice unconditional love is because we use the example of chesed shalemes, the kindness of looking after a dead body in which there's zero reciprocation. There is zero feedback. There's no, thank you. There's nothing. So it's pure chesed. There's nothing to even inspire the chesed. That's chesed shalemes. So I said go and practice a moment of unconditional love. This week I ask you to go and discover how often you practice Gevurah. You're going to find it's all the time. Chesed is innate, we tend to give. Gevurah is now, hang on, I don't want to give so much. It's like when you're walking down the street and someone comes up and goes, you want to give me a few bucks, mate? You want to give me a few bucks? Chesed says, do I want to give you a few bucks? I'll give you my house. You poor thing, I'll give you my house. Then Gevurah kicks in, and that's the question. Some people go all the way extreme and go, nick off, you homeless. And other people go, yeah, sure, I'll give you a few bucks. Not my mother, I'll say this on camera. My mother won't give him a few bucks. She'll go, oh, you poor thing, come with me, I'm going to buy you a sandwich. You know? But if you think about that, that's a real Gevurah. Because maybe the tendency was, I don't want to give you anything actually, because I mistrust you. I possibly suspect this is not going towards your food, it's going to feed some other habit. And so Gevurah says, Then the Gevurah Shebegvurah says, I'm not going to withhold, I'm going to give. I'm going to let chesed in, but I'm not going to give money, I'm going to give a sandwich, because I know I want to nourish this person. So that would be a case of Gevurah dominating Gevurah, where the Gevurah says, I'm not giving anything. And Gevurah says, oh yes you are, but you're going to do it like this. You're not going to give money. It's not, oh yes you are, young man. It's you're going to, but you're going to give a sandwich. You're going to do it in a constrained way. I'm not giving you my house, and I'm not even giving you money. I'm giving you a sandwich. So that's an example of Gevurah Shebegvurah.
Doubt fit into all of this.
How does what?
Doubt.
Doubt. Well, doubt is on an intellectual level, because that's where doubt takes place. What's doubt? I don't know. Let's just talk about doubt for a sec. Let me just look at my notes to make sure I've covered everything I want to get through. Yeah, we can stop. We can stop for doubt for a sec. What is doubt?
Well, if Chesed is all this giving and light and things, inspiration, things coming through, and doubt is more like a holding back and considering, or
doubt is an intellectual process. In the intellectual process, you consider things, but then that will translate into a certain emotion. The emotion that might be the byproduct of doubt is Gevurah. I doubt, therefore I withhold. So Chesed and Gevurah are not brains, they're responses. If we live our life according to what Chassidus wants, which is Moich Shalat HaLev, that the mind rules over the heart, mind over emotion, then I will always go through an intellectual process. Sometimes that intellectual process will be corrupted, but I should always be responding with a thought and then deciding which way am I going to go. Same with Hashem creations of the world. Hashem thinks, I have a dream. Sorry, that sounds too similar to someone else. Hashem has an idea. We don't want to compare anything now, you know. Hashem has an idea. And the idea is dir b'tachtonim, which is the finished product. Then to translate the thought process into a series of emotions of give. Okay, Hashem's got to give. That's no longer intellectual. Giving is an action, is a response. How much to give? Send the message doesn't go back upstairs after chesed. What actually happens the way we normally behave is not really Moich Shalat HaLev. We don't really live our life according to this principle. We think we do, because we're being conscious, but being conscious doesn't mean you're practicing Moich Shalat HaLev. What actually happens is, Moach says, the brain says, do something, then the lev, the emotion, starts responding, then sends a message back upstairs, hang on, am I feeling the right thing? And the brain then kicks back and goes, no, you're feeling the wrong thing. Sends the message back downstairs, start feeling like this. Then you start feeling like that, then the message goes back to upstairs. What about now? I'm not sure if this is the right thing. The brain goes, no, this isn't the right thing, go back down and change the emotion. That's being conscious of your emotion patterns, but that's not being truly Moich Shalat HaLev. Moich Shalat HaLev was that Hashem went through a thought, kaviyochel, anthropomorphically. You know, Hashem doesn't think. There isn't a process of time and results, but if we had to paint it out, this is how it would be. Hashem thought it through. Hashem saw what his goal was. I want this finished product. And the way I'm going to get the finished product, this is no different from building a house. You don't go, I want to build a house. Right. Men behave like this, actually. According to Rochel, according to my wife, this is how men behave. Men wake up Sunday morning and we say, we want to build a house. So we go to Bunnings. But I don't know what sort of house I want to build, but I'm now in Bunnings. So the brain has said, go to Bunnings. That's an intellectual decision. Heart goes to Bunnings. I'm going to go shopping. Sends a message back upstairs. What do I buy? I don't know how I'm going to do it. Build scaffolding. Okay, buy a whole lot of 2x4s, a whole lot of paint, a whole lot of... Yeah, come home. And they're like, got a bit carried away with the shopping. Still don't know what to do. The thought process of creation wasn't like that at all. It was, I want to build a house. And before I even go to Bunnings, before God went to the anthropomorphic Bunnings, Hashem then thought through, I want this finished product. In order to get a finished product, Z, Y, X, backwards, until it got to A, and then said, right, I've got this all worked out. Chesed, create. Gevurah, define. And every day since, there have been moments of Gevurah in how Hashem runs this world. There has never been oh, that failed. Go back to Bunnings. Whip this world out and let's try this again. That's not what Olam HaTorah was. It wasn't a mistake. Some people think it was a mistake. The writing doesn't say Olam HaTorah was a mistake. Hashem didn't make any mistake. It was part of the process. So the thought process of Moach Shal Talev is where you thought through everything, down to even how my emotions are going to respond. So the chesed was very calculated to be followed by the gevurah, to be followed by tiferes, to be followed by netzach, to be followed by hod, to be followed by yesod, to be followed by malchus, and finished product. There was a thought process. It wasn't bounced like a ping pong up and down. So what we are reading about here is, although I talk about chesed and gevurah being almost on par and then tiferes after, in the process of creation, when chesed gevurah, chesed had to come via gevurah, had to go then via tiferes, each one fed. That was the tzimtzum. Chesed, gevurah, tiferes, which was a form of gevurah, netzach, form of gevurah, hod, form of gevurah, yesod, form of gevurah, it's constant definition and contraction. So when we talk about doubt is an intellectual process that leads to a certain emotion becoming more dominant. And it will usually lead to a greater level of gevurah, of that withholding. I doubt you, therefore you're not getting my chesed. If I love you, you're getting all my chesed. Because I've intellectually translated love into, I need this. So that's that. So we've got our different levels of gevurah. We understand gevurah as an emotion. We understand gevurah as a personality type. We talk about Yitzchak of the Avos. I just want to finish with this. Yitzchak is the embodiment of Gevurah. Abraham was chesed. His tent was open from four sides. Anyone could come in, be my guest, I'll feed you, I'll clothe you, I'll drink you, whatever you want. If whatever the liquid version of feeding is, that's what he was doing. Whatever you want. He traveled. Chesed is a personality type who just travels, they're doing everything. I'm here, I'm there. Chesed, I'm in the papers. Chesed, I'm here, I'm la la la. Gevurah is very contained. Yitzchak didn't move. Yitzchak stayed in Israel his whole life. Yitzchak wasn't into the whole outreach program. You interacted with him, he interacted with you. But he didn't go out looking for friends. Avram was always looking for friends. He was a chesed guy. I'm out there, I'm loving life, loving people, and I'm going to share the love. Yitzchak's like, my dedication is to up there. Please don't disturb me. I'm raising a family. I'm working hard with what I've got. I'm looking after the family investments. I'm digging wells. You make a war with me, I will come down on you like a ton of bricks. But he didn't travel, didn't look out, so he is seen as Gevurah, much more restrained as a personality, much more constrained in lifestyle. He didn't flaunt wealth or anything, that's for sure. And he didn't get involved in a lot of the things that his father had once got involved in. And that's why, not next week, but the week after, we're going to learn about Yaakov, Jacob, being tiferes, being this real weird hybrid between the chesed, the outward. He traveled like his grandfather and welcomed people like his grandfather, but also dealt with the home issues and the spiritual issues like his father did, which was Yitzchak. So he becomes this balance of chesed being outward and gevurah being very, very much enclosed and restrained. And that's what we're going to learn in the next class.